We're starting right now. We're like live now.
Oh, cool. Well, fuck it. We'll do it. Okay, Bill
Let's go
O'Reilly.
live. Let's go.
Let's go live. Shoot me a link. I'll throw some. See if we can get some more people to watch this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, just hanging out.
Here, I'll give you. I'll send you a link. Here,
Cool.
I'm just gonna send it to you here because it's easier.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Oh my god. Tremendous coolness.
All right. We're live. I'm here with language learner and Constantine and Charles. How's everybody doing?
Hi, Andrew. Doing good.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say right now. So Constantine, how is your fundraiser going?
It's going all right. We went from $3,500 in one day to $33,000 on the second day.
Yeah,
we had a lot of raised donations because of the drama that is happening around the donations. You know, wasting money and getting wrong things to Ukraine. And it actually moved a lot of people to donate. So I don't know. It's something good came out of something bad. You can probably call it like this, but it went from a complete disaster to absolute success. So I'm happy.
Yeah, that it was quite the turn of events. I don't know. I wasn't expecting it to jump off like that, but it's a welcome surprise. So
Yeah, and I gotta say, NAFA fellas, they donated 3.5, I think, almost $4,000 for us. And then by NAFA, I mean official NAFA account. There is a NAFA store that sells merch, and they use the money to support legit charities. And they chose our effort, and they send just around $4,000, and it was a complete surprise for me because it was not like, I mean, they supported us a lot before. They send us our different fundraisers. They send money to them as well, but none of those times it was coordinated. It was just, I'm sitting in front of my PC and I'm like, "Ooh, someone donated," and I'm looking. Oh, it's $4,000. Oh, it's from
yeah,
NAFA. Oh, geez, that's a lot.
yeah.
No one even tells me like, "Oh, you look at this, you're gonna get the donation." It's more like, let's send this guy $4,000 and let's imagine how surprised he's gonna be, and that was me.
Yeah. So when Constantine says disaster, he means that in the first day of the fundraiser, there were very few donations, and then the second day, there were a huge number. So that's what he means when a disaster. It went from a disaster to a success, meaning the first day got like no money, and the second day got a huge amount. So at the end of the second day, everybody's happy.
Yeah, and I want to say that usually with donations, what you get on the first day, it's like it's important. If you get less than 30% on your first 24 hours, it's really going to be hard to push.
Yeah. So anyways, we so there are a few things to talk about today. First, there's the basic news, which, to be honest, I don't think the news is terribly interesting to talk about, and I'll talk about it. But it's really not super interesting to me. More interesting to me was there was an R.D. Green interview. The interview was actually filmed on, I think, July 2nd, so it was actually like several weeks ago. But I only watched it a few days ago when it was translated into English. So there are a few things he talked about that I kind of want to address. Namely, that he compares this offensive in Zaporizhia to the offensive in Kherson. because he was in Kherson during that offensive, so he knows a lot about it. And he had talked about it a lot over the past year or so, and he's comparing this offensive to that. Now, a lot of people think of the Kherson offensive in terms of the bridge and the river and the Gimlerizing of the bridge, and all of the barges and pontoons and whatever that Russia was using to cross the river at the time. So that's what a lot of people think of it as, but he doesn't think of it that way, and that's interesting to me, because he thinks of Kherson as a battle of attrition, where Ukraine was doing kind of three things. The first thing was attriting Russian artillery. The second is attriting their armor. And the third was systematically destroying their defensive lines with their artillery. So those are the three things that he saw going on in Kherson, and why Ukraine eventually won. And he's saying that basically the same thing is going on in Zaporizhia at this point, except scaled up. He says it's scaled up 3 times. I don't know if that's accurate, but he says it's 3 times scaled because instead of having 30,000 troops, it's more like 90,000. So anyway, so that's kind of the basis of what I would like to talk about today, and I'm curious if any of you have an opinion on that basic argument of attrition.
I guess I can start, or do you want to start? Language? Go ahead.
No, please, after you. I think you may have a better idea of it from a strategic levels perspective. I've just got a small snippet view on it. But as far as attrition goes, there's a lot of that in general in terms of resources, manpower, and equipment that I think can be surprising even to the units themselves as they shift from a more sedentary to a larger scale offensive role.
So yeah, I mean, I must say, Andrew, like in language, like I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had the same questions in my mind as what he was bringing up in terms of how should progress be measured? Because if we're measuring it by meters, then we haven't seen a ton of progress, right? Tree line to tree line, like he says, is about 900 meters, tree line to tree line, or a kilometer. We've looked at that on the map, and this sort of looks like the hedgerows of northern France after Normandy. I mean, it's hard to get from tree line to tree line, especially with all of the minefields, not just anti-tank but anti-personnel, which we've all seen. And the question, of course, is, is it bogged down? And I would say, a couple of weeks ago, I had similar questions, because I think even at the beginning, if I'm not wrong, Andrew, I mean, I think even the Ukrainians themselves thought that progress would be measured primarily in distance. And then shortly after the offensive, or the, hard to say exactly, okay, well, when did the offensive begin? But when the assault in Zaporizhia began, shortly after that, then it very much, my interpretation is that they realized, or they started treating it more like the Kherson offensive, where it was months before they made much ground, but when they made ground, it was in big chunks because of the attrition of, and what I'm going to say here is combat power. So I think a lot of people equate combat power with people. That's not right. There's often this, a lot of people say this 3-to-1 or 10-to-1 advantage or all that stuff. And a lot of people equate that with people. That's actually not what's meant by it. It's meant by combat power, which is not equal to people. And so I agree with what he says in that if we're measuring it by the attrition of combat power, I think I agree with him. And we talked about this with CJ for a while. He agreed with this, is that it is actually going well in terms of the progress in attrited combat power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been so many pieces of equipment that Russia has lost. They've lost dozens and dozens of tanks, and a lot of them lost in counterattacks. They've lost huge numbers of BMPs, of trucks, of artillery pieces, MLR, or MRL, whatever. I'm dyslexic. I can't ever remember which was which. But anyways, they've lost tons of grads. They've lost self-propelled guns, all sorts of things. They've lost so many pieces of equipment. Now, so if we, so okay, so when Ukraine, well, okay, when you do these attacks, you move up to a Russian position, right? Like a trench line of some sort, probably in a tree line. You assault it, and you may eventually, like, assume you capture it at some point. Maybe it takes you a day, maybe it takes you a week, but eventually you'll capture that position, right? And you'll move up maybe 1 kilometer in the process, and each line of defenses is about 1 kilometer away from each other, on average. Because if there'd be like one line of defense like on this tree line, and the next one might be this tree line or this tree line, which is about 1 kilometer away. So that's roughly the distances that we're talking about, is about 1 kilometer at a time. But on average, they're about a kilometer apart, but not all of them are 1 kilometer apart, right? So eventually, if we look at these like these defensive positions on the map, I can't remember which map to look at this with. Maybe this one? No. This one? Yeah, this one's good. Okay, so these are like the main defensive positions, is all the little dots, right? So eventually, if you break through one of these more heavily defended positions, the next position behind it might not be 1 kilometer away. It might be several kilometers away. So in that sort of sense, you might have bigger breakthroughs every once in a while, because the defensive line will stop at some point. And if you attrit the forces on that line enough, they will eventually have to abandon that line and fall back to the next one, which could be however far away it is. It could be 2, 3, 5, 10 kilometers away. Who knows? So in that sense, you could expect big breakthroughs, or if you call it a breakthrough, every once in a while. But generally speaking, the advances will be slow. And those slow advances are not necessarily a bad thing. It's all part of the process. Anyways, I'm going to keep. I'm slowly going back in time. That's what I'm doing here. On the map. I was waiting for the days to load, but I think they're all loaded now, so I'm just going to go faster. Anyways.
But yeah, I mean, for me, and I mean, I've heard, I know a lot of people, if we compare it to Kherson, a lot of people talk about the bridge and the river, and I mean, I do think that that was an important aspect to the ability of the Ukrainians to attrit the combat power on the right bank of the river, in that it was less simple for the Russians to maintain it. But in the region that we're talking about here, and I know, Andrew, we've talked about the pros and cons of attacking in Zaporizhia at all. But there are similar conditions in Zaporizhia as there were in Kherson, in that it is difficult for Russians to maintain combat power, and the Ukrainian army is stronger than it was in the Kherson offensive. So it's not the same Ukrainian army that was attacking in Kherson. It's a different one, and it's stronger than it was. Granted, it's not, there isn't the giant water obstacle to cross, but it's not completely dissimilar in that getting to this region for Russia is not simple for the Russians, and supplying it is not simple. And the Ukrainians have consistently over the last month and a half been interdicting every efficient method they have of maintaining combat power in the region, and they continue to do it, I assume.
Yeah. So obviously, the Kerch Bridge has been damaged again. So that is one way to hinder the logistics. I don't know if the rail bridge is currently capable of carrying freight. Do you know if it's been carrying any freight? I know there's passenger cars, but I don't know about the heavier stuff. Like, can it carry a tank?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. The Russians say that it can, but again, it's kind of like show me, and I haven't seen it. So I don't really know what to believe. But even beyond the Kerch Bridge, I mean, if we look further down the rail lines from Crimea into Zaporizhia and other places after the Kerch Bridge, the rail lines have been hit and other bridges have been hit. I'm sure that they're able to repair them, but none of these measures is permanent. It's just a constant thing, just as it was in Kherson. I mean, they hit the Kakhovka Dam, the bridge by the lock, and the Russians kept bridging over it. They hit the Antonovsky Bridge, and the Russians kept using barges to get over it and ferries to get over it. So nothing is permanent, but it all just adds sand into the gears, which wears on an army.
Yeah. So I'm looking for where that boat was. Oh, that boat was over here. The people are asking about Russia moving things by boat, and they are, of course. They have this little boat here full of equipment. So yeah, that boat is in Russia, although obviously it's going to go to Crimea at some point. Don't know when, but it will probably, or if not, maybe up here in the Berdyansk. I don't really know where that boat's going to go, but it's going to go somewhere. Is this the airbase you want to look at? Jay's asking me about the airbase. Yeah, they're painting airplanes onto the airbase, which is always fun. It's always fun to paint them on the ground instead of having real ones. But anyways, yeah. So Artie Green, I think, had a lot of interesting points. He had a lot of points that I don't really want to touch, like he has theories about why the United States isn't giving more equipment, which I don't think he's right about. Basically, he was stating that he thinks the United States' main goal is to destroy the Russian government and not to win the war. So that they're rationing weapons in a way to prolong the war long enough to destroy the government. I don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true, honestly. But and then he had some other statements along those lines as well. But the main point about comparing this to Kherson. So Kherson, I mean Zaporizhia, it has the weakness of of moving equipment in, you have to move things either to Mariupol from the east, which is easier said than done, or you have to move things through Crimea, which is again easier said than done, and is getting more difficult. Ukraine has destroyed multiple major rail hubs in Rykove and Novo-Oleksivka. So these are two main towns, which are right here, right across, basically right across the Kherson Crimea border. So these were both major ammo depot type places. Rykove is probably the big one. I believe the British, didn't they say they destroyed like, what was it, 2,500 tons or something? I can't remember the number, but it was like a stupid amount of ordnance. And in this satellite imagery, if we go back in time, I might even have it here, but I don't. These are the big explosions.
That was huge.
Yeah, so
That was huge. That was where the whole, I want to say like almost 2 square kilometers was destroyed by the detonation of that supply depot. It was massive.
yeah, these buildings were not only destroyed, but their foundations were erased. Like it was broken down to nothing. So it was like all of these buildings, not these buildings, but all of these buildings over here were storing just tons of munitions, and even their foundations were destroyed. It's basically just a crater now. These taller buildings almost survived. They're partially destroyed, but yeah, that so this was one train town. The next train down south, Novo-Oleksivka, this was similarly destroyed, although not nearly as spectacularly. I believe these two buildings in this grain elevator were totally destroyed they were carrying ordnance of various types. So that is kind of what went on in the south down here. And other towns along this rail have also been attacked. Yakimivka has been attacked, and then further up the line, there's Mirna and Pivnichne and Melitopol, obviously, and up the line even further, there's Tokmak, and all of these other places are also pretty regularly attacked. And a lot of these bridges along this rail line have been destroyed, sometimes more than once per bridge. Repairing these bridges is not difficult. It can probably be done in a day or two, but they have been taken out multiple times. So yeah, this whole logistics hub. Oh, and also we should say that these road bridges have been damaged. I'm not sure if they've been repaired by now, or I believe they built pretty much immediately built a pontoon bridge under it, I believe. I don't know if these have been repaired yet, but there is a third bridge right here. So these two were damaged. There's a third bridge right here, which is a rail bridge that has not been damaged, but I do believe it will be damaged at some point. This is obviously one of the main rail bridges. When these roads were taken out, the quickest way to Kherson was then to go through this giant detour this way, which is adding hundreds of kilometers to your route. You can't really drive along the coast here because the roads are not really built for that, although some of these roads have been widened, but it still can't really support the amount of traffic that Russia needs to support their military. So yeah, that is the issue with coming from Crimea, and then the issue from coming from the east is that the Mariupol highways, like all of the highways going basically east to west through Mariupol, are getting shelled pretty regularly. And also the highway is going north out of it, obviously. So these are all, they're not in tube artillery range, but they can be hit by various sorts of weapons. And if Ukraine, so I'm gonna draw a little circle here. What's the range of a tube artillery? It's like 40 kilometers or something. So this is kind of the death circle for Mariupol. Russia does not want Ukraine within that circle. It'd be very, very bad for them. Tokmak is currently within the circle, which is kind of bad for them as well. So these are all of the supply issues that Russia is having in the south. But it's not even so much about the supplies as much as it's the destruction of equipment that is not easily replaceable. They're frankly running out of stuff. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I feel that when we say Russia is running out of equipment, people think that they're literally going to have zero equipment. But that's not necessarily what I mean when I say they're running out. I mean more that the stuff that they have in reserve is getting so small that they're running out of options for how to deploy it. Right now, they're doing this large, I don't even know if it's large, but they're doing this intense, increasing intensity of combat. Let's put it that way. Or maybe a small offensive. I don't know. However you want to describe it. They're on an offensive type stance in this Kremena to Kupiansk, this whole area here. They're currently attacking lots of towns. They're trying to move towards Nevska, Makivka. They're trying to push west from Karmazianivka. They're trying to get to Nadia. They're trying to push out of Drelzhna. And
But
also,
Andrew,
yes,
Andrew, I thought this was an 100,000 man assault force that the Russians had there.
You're gonna give me a stroke. Maybe we can just touch briefly on that. Not even that allegation, but it is and I've been saying this for over a year now. The only thing that made, when I was talking about things, somewhat useful for people is that I consistently went to Ukrainian sources the same way that Constantine does, the same way that Andrew does, the same way that Charles does. If you are reliant on English language translation through a second or third level source of the statements being made, you are always opening yourself up for misinterpretation and misunderstanding. And I got to see that feedback loop happen in real time, and then everybody was talking about 100,000 Russian assault troops ready to storm across the borders all the way to Kharkiv, when that's not what was sent, that's not what was described, that's not what was even really expressed, even by, frankly, the Ukrainian propaganda figure that was being used to make an internal statement. And all of that can be avoided instead of just rage retweeting the first Twitter post you see. Check what the source is. What does that source link back to? What does that source link back to? Hint, it's probably in Ukrainian and Russian. And keep doing that till you run out of places it can link back to. And then maybe try and check and see, is this what it's actually saying? More often than not, your headline in English is not indicative of the statements made in Ukrainian. And I'll get down off the soapbox now, but this is a good example of why you don't rely on English language media to tell you about events happening in a country where English is not the primary language.
Yep. But at the same time, I don't want the fact that Russia moved forces there to be overlooked, because the forces they moved there are actually a threat. It's just that it was totally misunderstood, and it's unfortunate that these things happen, but they happen, I guess. So I don't know. You're closer to this than I am. Is there anything you want to say about the fighting here?
So I'm vaguely in that area, right? Somewhere between the somewhere between Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, and Liman, or not Liman, Seversk. So like I get to watch HIMARS take off pretty much every day from nearby an area that I'm in, which is, great. Tax dollars will work. I'll pay my taxes from now on. Thank you very much. I don't think I'm surprising the Russians by telling them this, that there's certainly a lot more Ukrainian aviation moving in that Crimea direction. And they seem to be doing well, given what I'm hearing. And that's not just, the reports online, I'm reading them, but like the audible explosions after they pass by and then they come back, which is always cool. There's a lot of combat power being expended there, or more so than I have seen in one localized area before, even when I've been in other areas of the Donbass. I haven't heard any real panic from Ukrainian units that are involved in that region. We've been helping out with some other people, and the units do talk to one another. So it's not, they would be discussing it more. Frankly, even the most doom-saying guys are saying, "Oh, well, we'll have to fight over Liman again." Or the whole idea is that the Russians would try and push to the Zarabets River, and then from there try and push to the Oskil River, and then roll all the way up and down to Kupiansk, say, "This is the border of the grand new Luhansk People's Republic, Oblast, whatever, and we're suing for peace." That's the expectation. I frankly don't follow the movement on the ground there as much. I know the Russians had been making pushes, and had been doing so with propaganda that actually got regurgitated to me in a parking lot here by a foreigner, which I thought was quite funny. He was like, "Oh, I hear that the Russian special forces are leading the assault," and I believe it was Konstantin who was just very matter of fact said, "Haven't you been in country long enough to stop believing these rumors?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right." But they do have an amassed force. It's probably a couple brigades. They are competent, but I will be interested to see how far they can advance past these first and second line defenses, and whether they are willing and able to commit to offensive operations in more built-up areas rather than these hills and fields, especially along the Zarabets. So I'm really talking about Liman and whatever the town immediately east of Liman is that I always forget about. My hypothesis is they would culminate before then, just based on what I've seen of Russian assault forces elsewhere in the Donbass. But who knows?
Yeah,
I don't think their chances are high.
that town you're thinking of is Zarichna.
Zorichny, yes, that's the one. That I just don't see it. I mean, it's entirely possible. I'm not going to say anything that the Russians don't already know. Well, let's be clear on that. But the Ukrainian forces that were there around Crimea, between Zorichny and Crimea, I've trained them. Right, they're TDF guys, and they got annihilated. Just absolutely wiped out. Had to leave and get reconstituted months ago. Right, so we can extrapolate from that it's a hellhole. And based on the stories, pretty much is just trenches, woods, artillery, trenches, woods. And at some point, units get degraded. And what Russia has been very fond of doing is hitting units when they're either changing position, when they're resupplying. I know the guys I had trained, this is some time ago, this is long since happened, had issues where they held a position for a couple weeks, and then some other dude showed up and they were gone in like 11 days because they just couldn't find anymore. They were all dead or wounded. And with that level of attrition, at some point, if you have enough forces to capitalize on it, means you can make breakthroughs. And Russia has done this before. This is, frankly, based, from just a cursory recollection, this is how they make all of their major offensives. This is how they pushed up from Popasna towards Lysychansk. This is how they cut off Soledar. This is how they cut off the top of Bakhmut and caused the fall of that city. It's like this every single time. And there's, lessons to be learned from that, obviously, but I think one the Ukrainians have learned is we have defensive lines and we can communicate and pull back as opposed to just abandoning them, which they've gotten a lot better at. So, no, it's a lot of words and, navel gazing to say that I am not imminently worried about the fall of Liman. I am frankly not imminently worried about a large-scale Russian assault pushing all the way to really anywhere past the Zarabets River. I can see them getting there just based on the topography, and then it'll be a pain in the ass to get them out of there.
That's really kind of the threat.
Yeah. I don't see them pushing into Liman again. I do not see the Russians interested in pushing through that zone. I think there's enough bridges there I think there's a bridge in Zarechny that gets blown up all the time as is. I think the Ukrainians would just blow that one and just say, okay, well, you get to start on that side of the river now. Congratulations. Here, have some more 152. And that's about it.
Yeah, this bridge, I don't think it exists anymore. I think it's been killed. Because I'm looking at it on the map right now. This does not look like it's structurally sound anymore. But yeah,
people both sides of the bridges are okay, or like you go into the town to the west, the town to the east. I think it's Zarechny and whatever the town immediately to the east of it is. At Korska, and like in those towns, you're more or less okay. But if you're on the bridge, they must have like a drone or some dude sitting in a cave staring with binoculars and his finger on a button to call for artillery because somebody gets blown up on the bridge like every day, or was for a while.
Yeah,
like somebody was setting the clock to it.
There was a video came out a while ago. I posted it on Twitter when it came out, but it was basically these two guys trying to cross this bridge here. And you can even see the pontoon bridge is right south of it. So, yeah, this bridge is definitely dead. But anyways, this was back before I died. But they were driving across and they like started over here and they were driving and there's like 3 vehicles on fire, piles of dead bodies on the street, and they're just going to try to drive across. That is, with artillery shells landing on them, by the way. So that was this bridge for a long time. I have talked to people who drove across this bridge, and he told me that this was the most dangerous thing he's ever done in his life. As soon as he got across the bridge, he turned north on this road, and he said, all these roads are totally safe. Like, there's nothing going on. But that bridge, craziness. But this, yeah, the bridge is dead now. You can... even on Google Maps, it's gone, and there's a pontoon bridge visible just south of it. Yeah. I've also I've talked to some Ukrainian people who live in these two towns, or at least they used to. They grew up in these towns, and one of them was telling me how he used to cross this bridge every single day. And seeing the videos of the carnage on this bridge, it's difficult for him to reconcile that being like a possibility, you know, from his like happy little like childhood memories to just absolute carnage. But anyways,
it's surreal. I think I mentioned it before once, how especially guys who are from any of the cities that had heavy combat, because, you know, they were writ large, there were areas people spent their whole lives, sometimes not all their whole lives, but they spend most of their lives in Mariupol if they're from there, or Donetsk, or Lysychansk, or, you know, really it's those 3 are the ones I hear most about. Guys say, well, my whole plan is just to go, you know, either they fought there, or in some cases, they were TDF there, and then when the cities fell, they joined a regular unit or another TDF unit or what have you. They say, I just want to fight back to my hometown. I want to sit down on my couch, and I want to just call it a war. Say I'm done. And there was one dude who was from Mariupol and gave one of my guys a patch. You know, it was like something or other. And he was just, and they finished training. Everybody's passing out photos. Oh, we're going to take pictures. Da, da. And he's just like, hey, you want to see something? He's just like showing me like pictures of like places in Mariupol. I'm like, isn't that the drama theater? He's like, oh yeah, I used to live like right XYZ, you know, kilometers away. And this was this and this was that. And he actually had done that sort of like before and after shot. And I think he had like a whole album to, you know, show people or whatever. And he was just like, yeah, it doesn't look like it's the same place. He's like, I can remember it looking like this. And he'd show a picture of it as it was with him and his girlfriend or wife or whatever. And then he's like, and then this is the picture that I saw afterwards. And he goes, and that doesn't seem like it's the same place. It doesn't make sense to me because I always remember going there on dates. And now it's a crater. And it's just, I think he seemed like he was he went into some whole long rant about that I didn't quite understand. But I think there's a lot of people who are having trouble with that. And I think that's actually going to be a bit of an issue when Ukraine starts moving back into these, frankly, all but rubbleized cities. I think you're going to have a lot of people with immediate trauma because it's one thing to say, like, oh, I'm going to fight back to my hometown and I'll liberate it. That's another thing to be like, your house doesn't exist anymore and everything you know is gone. And go capture that pile of rubble that used to be your girlfriend's house. Like, I think that's something that in a perfect world, people should get psychological help for ahead of time rather than during, because I am worried that it's going to be an issue.
There was an interesting story along those lines that came out earlier today. I don't know if you saw this, but it basically said that Ukraine is like prioritizing sending troops to liberate areas that they grew up in. It was an interesting thing I saw today. I don't even know how that's possible, but
I know a lot of people. Yeah, it's strange, like, to make an accent on that, because if you have a brigade and you have people in different units, you're not gonna say like, okay, let me get 30 people from this village and send them to storm. But I know I had a lot of friends who liberated area around Kharkiv, especially Izum. And it was quite touching experience for them, when you come back to your town that was destroyed, and you are like, they were shocked, I would say.
it's a lot of emotions to go through that, because I honestly can't imagine liberating your hometown. There'd be a lot of emotions going on.
I will say that I don't even know if it's technically possible, even if it's, stated as a goal to send people back, unless you have something like, this is the TDF unit for Lysychansk or whatever. So we're sending them back to liberate Lysychansk because they know the streets. Okay, there's some rationale to that, but like, in one of these units that we've worked with, which was actually based around the Kievska region originally, there's people from all over, man. There's people from Kherson, Mariupol, Ivano-Frankivsk, Donetsk, Luhansk. I mean, it's a whole grab bag. So I suspect that's more of a PR statement than a functional statement, because while you'll meet individuals who say, like, this is my goal, realistically, it's not like it's the whole brigade's goal. It's just to fight to this one dude's apartment and then sit down. It's just one guy giving himself something to get through the day, and then the next day after that.
Yeah, and when they say like they're prioritizing, I take that to mean similar to what happened in like Kharkiv, where they had like Kharkiv-based forces liberate Kharkiv. So that you may have not literally liberated your hometown, but you at least were in the area. So maybe they won't send forces to completely different areas from where they came from. Maybe that's what they mean. I don't know.
It probably certainly helps with morale. I mean, I think that's a real thing. It helps with just people wanting to be there and being okay with waking up and fighting for the next trench line over. I can absolutely imagine that's a real powerful motivating factor. It's like, this is my land, this is my state. I'm from, Tennessee, and I'm fighting for Tennessee, as opposed to I'm from Arkansas and I'm fighting for New Jersey, right? Just to throw out random, U.S. states. There's more desire to push, and maybe that helps and maybe it doesn't, but you need to find something to shore up benefits. I know there was a lot of discussion way back when, near the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when there was talk about TDF units actually being allowed to deploy outside of their oblasts, and guys from, like, not to pick on them, but Odessa and Rivne being sent east. And I know at least one case where a unit from Rivne ended up in the east and basically just got mauled. And there was huge morale issues as a result. Which, look, frankly, if it's your, wife, husband, brother, son, daughter, whatever, who's fighting and dying in a part of the country that perhaps you don't feel as connected to as the oblast you live in, then yeah, there's going to be people who are complaining about that. I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong or justified or not, but it might be part of the reason why certain units are being sent to certain geographical areas. Or I could be full of shit, who knows?
So
Yeah, I got a question for language and for Constantine regarding trauma and morale. So I'm trying to find the right words here, but so in my experience in combat, it was never like trauma or morale was like everybody had the same size cup and you put water in it, and at some point it went over. It was really an individual thing and an individual unit thing, and that you saw some people in some units who had been through hell and back and were fine. I mean, in terms that they were effective and so on, and then you saw other people or other units that went through less and they became less effective, demoralized, traumatized, or so on. It wasn't like a linear thing, and it wasn't something where you could say, okay, this is when somebody has had enough. It was very individual and based on individual units. I mean, do you guys have the same experience, Constantine, in your time, or language what you see today?
I let language go first.
It
Language?
varies based on person. It's not a positive subject. There are dudes here who are just going to the next trench, and if they survive, that's great. And if they die, well, they don't really care anymore. That's just the reality of the circumstances, and their commanders work on it. But everyone's concussed. That does play an impact. I won't pretend to know all the statistics for U.S. and allied forces casualties in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts, but I imagine there's a much lesser amount of concussions there than there are here. And there are dudes whose temperaments just change completely. There's a lot of factors that go into morale. Generally, the only times where I've seen it where it's like, okay, everybody's demoralized, it comes down to command. There have been dudes who have gone, and there was the unit I keep talking about that they sat in a trench and got shelled by a tank for 3 days and didn't have any ATGM, right? And they just, the whole company got, pretty much wounded. None of the guys who were wounded in action died, thankfully. There were casualties beyond that, of course. But they came back and they were like pretty chipper about it. We were working with the evac team for that. And they were all like, this is great. This is fantastic. We're having, we're not enjoying it, but we think this is useful training and we appreciate everything and yada, yada, yada. Whereas, that's horrific to sit in a trench that you don't own and you can't get supplies to, and you just get shot at by a tank outside of any range of weaponry you have for 3 days. It's fucking miserable. I'd be traumatized. I'd never get back in a trench again. Yet, these guys are okay with it, versus other guys who say, nope, my commander's telling me to die. That's the one that affects morale the most. When people believe that their lives aren't being valued, that their commanders don't care, that's when it gets echoed by everyone, and then people surrender, people retreat without orders, or people just kind of shut down and become less than effective. That's been my experience, at least talking with people, but it's a small data set ultimately, so I think Constantine can speak more eloquently on this than I can.
I don't think I can be more eloquent than this, but you're right that it really, first of all, I also have a small sample. I don't have too much data. Only people that I surround me, and it also goes you have people by people basis where some people are really prone to it. It depends a lot on how they came in. Because there are simply people who came in, they were forcefully mobilized, and they never, considered themselves that to be to be fighters, and it's really hard to deal with those. Then you have a groups that simply, I would say try to suggest that to the current compare them to current state of this really reminds me of of the Trump crowd in the United States that says that the corrupt government, the government is so bad, the commanders are bad, they keep changing it, and no matter like what commanders are doing, no matter that the commander is actually his friend who he knows pretty well, he will still do this changing because he needs to find it's a certain type of people who just need to find who is someone responsible for the problems all the time, but not him. You have those, and they are really prone to drop the morale on entire units. So it really depends if you have critical mass of those or not. Then you have people who are trying to actually. These are most like language have said, people who go from one trench to another, and if they die, well, they don't. It's not that they don't care. No one wants to die, of course, but it's they're at the point like where they just I have to do this, and let's see if it happens. It happens. Of course, they're afraid. It's not like there are some soldiers, but those people are usually come from the most hardworking people, and they are not simple hardworking people. You don't see them on Twitter. You don't see them complain. And if they have a morale, if they don't trust the commanders, you will only see this when shit really starts boiling up and he sees like bad things. So it all depends on the unit composition. In our case, we had a lot of, personally, we had a lot of those who would, start complaining. One of the most common things is that we're being sent with the AKs against the tanks. What can we do, and they don't, and it's a morale issue. It's not the reality because he does not know that it's actually his squad, for example, it's pure AK and you have one RPG. That's all. That's because your squad is like this. But we have a fire support platoon that actually also attached to the sector that has ATGMs, but you just don't see them and you start complaining. Because you were not, you did not spend too much time on training as well. And it's such a mix. I don't think I answered the question right here. It's more like a rant, but morale is a big issue, not because people don't want to be there. It's just because we don't have, proper conditioning of those people, proper morale preparation initially. It's more like, we mobilize 500,000 people in territorial defense, National Guard, Border Guard, ZSU, Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we don't have, this huge school that would, from what I've seen in the United States happening, you have those sergeants, trying to yell at people, trying to decrease their morale, so people are before actually going to the front lines. This would, I think, give some conditioning for people to prepare to deal in the stress, to deal in the problem. We don't have anything like that, not because we have a bad military, but because we have mobilized so many people, and we simply don't have the infrastructure we don't have the trainers, so people are basically have to figure out those things themselves. And some units do, some units don't, so keep those things in mind.
Yeah, and just one thing real quick is that I don't want to confuse complaining with loss of morale or trauma. I mean, if there's one thing combat soldiers do better than anything, that's bitching and moaning. I mean, that's part of being a combat soldier. So, I mean, I understand. I think the three of us, or the four of us, all understand that morale and complaining are not the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's the shutdown is what I've seen in it. I'm very lucky and very blessed, I guess you could call it, that we haven't really interacted with any time where I've seen other trainers, especially in the western part of Ukraine, who approach it like they're a Marine drill sergeant. They just start yelling at these guys in a language they don't understand. You know, oh, you want to learn how to use rifles? Well, you're all fucking stupid, and you don't know how to. I'm sorry, language. You don't know how to do this, and you're an idiot, and you're going to get your guys killed. And obviously, if you're a combat soldier that just came back from 2 weeks to the front, and some dude you don't know is yelling at you in a language you don't understand because he thinks you're an idiot, you're just going to shut down. And I've watched guys literally just turn their backs on instructions, just walk away, and be like, we don't care anymore. Luckily, we've never had that happen to us, though there have been times where I've had guys who just say, no, I don't really want to do exercises. I don't want to practice. And I'll try and motivate them, but my big rule is, look, I'm not going to, it's like teaching a class in kindergarten, right, or middle school, not to downplay this, but if somebody doesn't want to learn, I'm not going to stop the lesson for 20, 30 other people because this one person doesn't want to. And that, let me reiterate, that is something that happens in the minority of situations. It makes me feel like crap, honestly. You have somebody who just goes, nope, it doesn't matter. That's the big one. I was asking him, like, why don't you want to do this? He says he doesn't care. I go, well, shouldn't he care? This is important. He's going to be in a trench in the next X days. It's probably useful to learn how to do medicine in a trench. He says he'll figure it out. I'm like, what's he actually saying? He says he doesn't care and this doesn't matter. And I'm like, okay, well, why is that? Is it because, everybody else seems to think he cares? I mean, the guy's been through combat. You can tell. It's just sort of the whole, I try not to think about it. That's the other big one. Guys come back and they say, I don't want to think about it because that, being at the zero line sucks. So I'm just going to choose to ignore anything that has anything to do with it, including training, which is designed to simulate that. Which, okay, that's a defense mechanism, I suppose. I'm no psychologist. I can't tell you whether that's good or bad. But that might also be part of it, is people just trying to section off parts of their reality so they don't, have a breakdown. That's, again, more speculation from somebody who's not a psychiatrist in the slightest. So take that with a kilogram of salt.
I was a sniper instructor, but not it was not my position, but it was one of the things that I have to substitute in. And out of the 30 snipers in our battalion that I had to go through the training with, I could manage to get only 6 to actually train. The rest were just like, I don't care. They were shut down, and no matter what I tried, like, it's just they were blocked, and they did not have. Their main trauma was not, combat or anything like that. Their trauma was that they were actually, mobilized, separated, and they've been there for like a year already, and they don't see the way out. It's not even combat, but people are being, they don't see way out. That's where that's where I've seen people being shut down, like, completely from you trying to, even interact with them. They lose interest. They don't, have eyes made of glass that you don't see anything in it. And it was like, it was very discouraging. But yeah, we had to pick those who wanted 6 guys, and we trained. I know one of them is there right now. It was 8 years ago, but one of them is there right now fighting.
Okay. Good talk.
If maybe we could talk a little bit about morale on the Russian side, perhaps, if that's, I don't want to hijack the conversation from you too much.
Sure, go for it. What do you want to say?
So something talking about with trench units and the assault troopers and whatnot, and if you start looking for it in videos, you start to see it a lot more. We don't really talk about is that they're, a lot of the training, I've seen the Ukrainian training, and because we do some medical training, and the Ukrainians are having their instructors doing tactical trainings and whatnot. It's all generally the same area. So I get bored, I wander over and take a look, and I don't know a damn thing about assaulting trenches, but their whole thing is like, you clear the trench and you kill everybody in every corner of it, right? And then some of the commanders go, well, yes, but actually no. And he started giving me this whole explanation about how if you clear the first like half or third of the trench and you do it really violently and really quickly, then the Russians almost always leave the second half. He's like, there's very few times, unless there's a bunker that a guy gets cornered in, that the Russians stick it out on at least the first line of defense. After that, there's different quality units further back that the Russians use for QRFs and whatnot. But he says the morale there, like there'll be times where they'll just drop grenades on them from drones and the Russians will just leave. That actually happened with another unit that we were training, and they got pulled out halfway through training. We're like, what the hell are these guys? They didn't come back after lunch. Oh, they're going to a trench. It was like now. And we were all honestly a little sore about that. We're like, what the hell, man? Like, you had to choose the guy that half of the group that's mobilized guys that doesn't really understand stuff versus the guys who are, badasses here. Like, I get why you want the badasses to get, a little more training if you have to choose, but come on. And then the Ukrainians shelled the hell out of the trench, dropped a grenade on a dude, and assaulted, and there was no Russians in the trench. They'd all left. I was like, oh, well, that's good. I'm glad that happened. But as compared to on the Ukraine side, where that still does happen, don't get me wrong. There are times where you're overwhelmed and people just leave. But on the Russian side, with the poor morale, with what they do with their dead bodies, i.e. they just leave them there. Like, there'll be times they just leave a dead body there for months, which I can't even imagine. Just, something that's only like a couple meters away from their trench, just a dude like long dead. And I can't imagine waking up every day and being like, yep, that's Yvonne number 27. He's been there for 3 months. And nobody's bothered to get out of the trench to move him. Stuff like that. Then when it seems like, oh, but now I'm going to die, a lot of them just leave. And that's actually where a lot of the casualties happen. I mean, I vaguely remember something about the Mongols where, like, that was where they got most injuries on the opposing forces was once they made them retreat. But, I don't know. It's morale has real impacts on the battlefield beyond just, oh, well, in a strategic sense, we're happy, we're healthy, we're fighting harder. Like, people just leave if they don't feel like it's going well. And if they think they're going to die and they're surrounded by death and everything sucks and the food sucks and your commander, you don't even know his name, but he probably wants you, he doesn't care about you, then yeah, as soon as, you start hearing machine gun fire down at the end of your trench and the other guys start screaming past you saying they're in the trench, we're all going to die, then yeah, I'd probably leave too if I was, some penal unit guy. And I suspect, and based on what I hear from dudes, that is happening every day.
And how do you call that when you have, or how do you call it in English when you have such a situation when you do things really quickly, violently, and aggressively, like clear the first half of the trench or quarter of the trench, and another section retreats? I think the question is to Charles, like what do you call that in English?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the term.
Yeah, when you get the initiative, you get the momentum, you move through the trench really quickly, and then you don't have to kill all your enemies. You just have to shock the first part, and then you will have the rest of them simply not having enough time to react, and the only thing that they have left is either retreat and panic or just surrender. How do you call this effect?
I don't know. I'm blanking. That's a good description.
I thought there is some kind of special thing.
There's a word for it, and I can't remember it. I'm trying really hard to remember it.
It's rout. The enemy is routed, is what I recall it being. Like, they're in a rout, they're retreating without orders or whatever, they're in disarray, abandoning. It's just a fancy way of saying abandoning stuff and fleeing in panic. Because people are people, they're not robots. Although, actually, now talk about robots, something I've heard a lot more about is intravenous drug use and stimulants among Russian soldiers that these guys have been fighting. And I mean, look, you can only believe so much of what Ukrainian soldiers say when about fighting Russians, because they'll be like, yeah, I killed 200 dudes with this knife right here. You're like, okay, man, like, great to hear. But I've heard enough from enough different people. They're like, oh yeah, we get into these trenches and there's just needles, or like the guys are just, they'll get there and they'll kill a Russian or whatever, and the body will decompose in a very strange way. Or they'll capture a guy and he's just like having the way they make it sound like he's, a crackhead, basically. And I was like, I don't know what that's like. And all the guys I talked to were like, it's weird. We don't know what's going on. So if you guys have heard things about increased, I suspect, stimulant usage, because we know this is something that Russia was at least around in Syria. There's some large methamphetamine or other amphetamine derivative that Syria was producing and giving to its own soldiers and other folks. I would be curious to know if you guys have heard about that too, if Russia's trying to use that to stem the issues of low morale, especially among their mobilized and conscripted folks.
So I go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So I haven't heard anything about. I've heard various vignette stories and things like that. I mean, low morale has observable symptoms. Those can be drug use. Those can be half following orders in terms of order to attack and basically look like they've made an attack but don't. Desertion, fratricide. I don't know, but I haven't heard anything conclusive about drug use. But these would be kind of the symptoms that you might see if the forces have systematic morale issues.
Yeah, there. I worry about overselling morale issues in the Russian military, because there's a lot of places where they're just holding on really hard, and they definitely don't have morale problems. So, yeah, I don't know.
That's not. Like, this was honestly a mistake I made, frankly, before I came over here, where I was reading about it and reading the Russian statements. I was like, oh, the Russians have morale, and every day it gets lower. And yeah, but that doesn't stop them from doing their jobs. So they may be absolutely miserable, but they also just I hate to use the term embrace the suck, because I don't think they're embracing it. I think it's more of a violent apathy to the situation. One of the common slurs is, a zombie army. But I think there's a lot of that where they have low morale, but they just kind of shut down. And they're like, well, we're going to stand here and do my job anyway. And then so they do.
Yeah. You got to understand that low morale, you have to exploit it. Low morale by itself does not win the wars. The opposing force have to know how to exploit this low morale. And one of the things that you have said was strike at the right place fast enough, or so you would get enemy forces just low morale amplifying the effect of it, and they would just tell to their commander, you goddamn bastard, you brought me here to die, and and do nothing. For example, one of the things I remember we've seen a video of Russian trench where Russian commander was throwing the AK at someone, at one of his soldiers, throwing it into his face and screaming, go fight. So you got to know how to exploit it, and which you must also understand that the Russian morale is low by default. It's basically their state, because they live in it. They have they come from very poor regions. They're not happy initially with their life. They manage to cope with it, and they manage to be somewhat successful. Not that successful, but they manage to do something with it, and just keep doing their stuff through low morale, because they don't feel empowered to change anything. In their effectiveness and their productivity is of course lower than anything else, but they have the numbers, for example. And also, what people don't understand is that there is a big difference between the morale of the trench troops that sit in the trench that has one effect on the battlefield, and there is a morale, for example, on those troops that perform the logistics, who drive those cars around. And there is morale of artillery, for example. There is morale of drone pilots. There are so many different troops that are like you may have your infantry in front being completely dismoraled, but you have artillery support that does not see all the things that are happening on the front lines. They have pretty okay morale, and they are not they are quite productive because they don't need to sit on the trenches in the front. And in most of the combats, you have your infantry almost more like a checkpoint sitting there, and all the heavy lifting is done by the artillery far behind enemy lines, just shooting and repelling our forces, or like ATGM teams who are much more mobile, who are much more have their, for example, they have ATVs, they have they don't sleep in those conditions that standard infantry does, and they can be effective, while the trench troopers are the ones who first will die, of course, but their morale may not be as important because they just there to shoot in some direction and stand there for long enough until you have other forces kicking in. So keep those things in mind.
We're looking at Svatove on the map right now, Andrew.
Yes, sort of. Yeah. This is kind of well, first, this is the topographic map that I have on my map. Unfortunately, this can't be released to the public yet, but I can use it with my special admin feature. But yeah, this is kind of the area that Russia is currently assaulting, which is north of Kremenna. They're not right at the moment. They don't seem to be attacking in the Kremenna area. They are attacking more north. So this is actually part of the line that had been very, very quiet for a very long period of time. And now all of a sudden, Russia has activated here, perhaps because they sent all of those troops in. They had to go somewhere, I guess. But they recently they crossed the Zherbets River here and captured this little forest. And if we look at this, the terrain, you'll see that. What happened? You'll see that Russia is currently kind of fighting uphill here. Not necessarily good for them, but they did capture this little forest here. Also, they are moving towards Nadia, or whatever this town is called. So this is a little low ground area that they're trying to move through, apparently. Maybe have greater success there. And they're also moving out of Drezhne towards Andriivka, which is they're kind of already on the crest of this little hill, and they're fighting downhill now. So I just thought it would be interesting to pull up this topographic map of this area here, and you can see that there's really this one ridge line that Ukraine was never able to fight across, and the other side of this ridge line is the valley of Svatove. So yeah, the fighting going on in this kind of middle area that used to be quiet is interesting to me. I don't know necessarily what their goal is of attacking here, other than they weren't attacking here before, so I guess it's just a change. There's no big city here. There's no obvious place to go necessarily. But yeah, that's where they're attacking at the moment.
I think that it's just a way to try and pull Ukrainian forces there rather than having Ukrainian forces ready to exploit a breakthrough around Bakhmut or in Zaporizhia or Avdiivka.
I think so. Yeah. They've also been attacking in where am I? Krasnohorivka, moving into this little. I'm going to turn all this off. They attacked into this mine shaft area, where we had tons of video of this particular assault, where a rather famous Russian crossed the Rainbow Bridge in this assault, which was weird. I don't know why he was there, but yeah, we showed some of this video on Tuesday, so this is kind of old news at this point. But yeah, this is like their big push into Krasnohorivka, kind of blew it. They had this kind of big push north of Avdiivka, and they also have this push going on near Svatove. So these are their assaults. I assume that their goal is to pull Ukrainian forces. I don't think any of these assaults really have a realistic chance of capturing a lot of ground. But yeah, that's kind of what Russia's doing at the moment, and they've also been pushing north back towards Rivnepil with some success, and they're also moving north of Pryutny towards Novodarivka. I don't know if they're assaulting kind of in this angle or this angle, but either way, they're kind of assaulting in these areas, and you can see that Russians are shelling these positions that are very close to Pryutny. So yeah, these are kind of the current Russian assaults. They've there's also some rumors today in this, going back to the Svatva area. There's rumors that they successfully crossed the Jerebets River and captured these forests, but I have not been able to. I didn't see any proof of that. Maybe I'll see it like after this stream. I'll go back and finish reading the news and everything. But I haven't seen as of now evidence that they actually captured this, other than all of the Russians saying that they have.
When you talk about the Russian commander, like, are you talking about Tashkent or whatever his name was?
The guy who met his maker.
Yeah.
What was his name?
No,
He was
those words.
the drone guy.
Oh, that dude. Yeah, I because there's been a couple.
Misha or something.
I can't remember his name, but yeah,
There's been a couple in the last couple days with brigade commanders. I don't think he was a brigade commander, but there was another guy called Tashkent who
there's Tashkent.
Yeah, and I think he got smoked by a drone somewhere around Soledar.
He was driving in a car, I think. Yeah, he was like in a van, and the van got hit. It makes me wonder, because I see a lot of videos of vans getting hit by drones, and I always wonder if Ukraine knows what the van is, or if they just attack anything.
Every van. Yeah. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. That one, I think they knew who was in the van. Because, I'm reasonable confidence on that one specifically for that unit. But somebody made a really good point. There's a question that's come up in your chat a few times. Is, Russian casualty counts, how do we know what they are, et cetera, et cetera. I could talk for a while on that, but I'll make it real brief. There's a wonderful Twitter account called Russian Officers in Ukraine, or RIU or whatnot, which logs the Russian officers that are killed in Ukraine.
With a caveat. There's a caveat. I want to say the caveat because it's actually important. Yeah. He has a deal with the Ukrainian government that he will not publish officers who die as a result of the Ukrainian offensive unless the Russian government publicly states that they have died. So there are lots of officers who have died that he has not written about because the Ukrainian government asked him not to.
Right. I'm the ones I'm more like the low level officers, starship lieutenants and whatnot. They're indicative of stuff, but you could make a whole big talk about brain drain and whatnot. The one I'm most interested in are the colonels. So the guys who actually lead brigades, right? Ukraine's lost, I think, it's been proven because it's in public. A colonel dies, you kind of have to talk about it. I want to say it's like two. There was one in the defense of Solidar and then one somewhere else. Not super common. Russia's lost 64, which is a staggering number. And yes, there's generals who are killed as well in strikes and what have you. But when you just compare those two of how many, senior Ukrainian officers have been killed or wounded versus how, that's not something you can hide. Like, for instance, and I'm using as an unfortunate example, when Da Vinci sadly passed away, well, that was national news here. People knew about that. Whereas you can't really hide it, especially somebody who's been in the military for, a decade plus. They have people who care about them. They get a state funeral or something. Whereas the same thing's true in Russia. They have a whole big deal. So it's not like Ukraine is hiding, 30 of its, colonels that have been wounded or killed. Whereas Russia certainly can't hide them as easily. And the disparity there with something in the low single digits to something in the medium to high double digits is, I think, a good general indicator of casualty counts. And that the disparity between the two. Obviously, it's not like a 30-to-1 ratio, unfortunately. But people talk about, are the Ukrainian numbers accurate? I wouldn't be surprised. I think some things they sandbag pretty hard, like the airplane shot down. I don't think that's accurate. I think everything they hit, they just put a checkbox next to it and say another, airplane eliminated. But as far as infantry, seeing videos of some of these assaults where the Russians just throw 100 people at a trench and it doesn't work, they're like, 2 days later we're going to throw another 100 people at it. I have no problem believing some of those numbers.
Yeah, and I believe Ukraine has lost a few relatively high-ranked officers recently. I think one of them was a lieutenant colonel. I think he was the head of a battalion. So they are losing officers. It's not like they lose zero, but they also aren't getting hit by storm shadows. So there's your difference. Also, it seems that for better or worse, a lot of the more senior officers Ukraine has lost, I think most of them have been pilots. Or at least a good chunk of them were pilots. For better or worse.
I think it's just been unfortunately the nature of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of if there's other news I should talk about. I guess I'll just go around the horn, just make sure I don't forget anything. We already talked about this Kupiansk area. I don't really feel like talking about the Kremenna area because we did that too. Bilahorivka, there were 2 videos today. I forgot to mark one on the map. There was another video that's supposed to be marked right here. I remember because that was from last year. I remember I dated it to last year. Anyway, so there was a video today of a Ukrainian drone dropping grenades on Russians in Bilahorivka. So that drone attack was right here. So it showed that Russia is very close to, if not in, this industrial area of Bilahorivka, which is kind of unfortunate. Moving on down, there was a video. It was actually a super interesting video, so I recommend going to the map and watching this. There's a link right here. You can go watch it on Telegram. But this was an assault where Ukraine attacked this position with a BMP-2 and a bunch of infantry. It was so interesting to watch. The Ukrainians were very lucky that the Russians did not have any anti-tank equipment. And if you watch the video, you'll see what I mean by that. Now there was, shelling going on. I think that's misplaced. Anyway, so there's just kind of shelling going around Klishivka. There's a video came out today of a whole bunch of vehicles destroyed near Andriivka. All these vehicles were destroyed like a few days ago, and this video was just showing the aftermath. Another video yesterday showed the combat. This was just the aftermath. So moving on down, yesterday, Russia retook all of these positions around Vasily, which is just north of Avdiivka. There's super intense fighting going on around Pervomaisky, but with no obvious changes in control. Moving on down, we already know about this attack on Krasnohorivka, and it was a while ago. But it seems that they're continuing to attack here for some reason. I don't know if they're attacking the exact same spot. They might be trying to like go a different route or something. Now, going on down, there's no... well, yesterday there was a video of a failed Ukrainian assault that occurred roughly right here. I'll just go to yesterday. So Ukraine was trying to kind of move down this road here. Unfortunately, they lost pretty much all their vehicles to mines, and the ones that were not destroyed by the mines were then taken out by things like lancets, etc., and artillery. This was a T-64 that was destroyed. So that was a failed assault. I don't know when the assault was, but it was probably recent. We were going through the satellite imagery trying to find the tracks for the tanks, because the tanks were driving in a way where I believe we could have seen it on the satellite, but none of the images showed it. Although on the flip side, a lot of the images recently have been very cloudy, although the weather in the video was very cloudy. So I don't know. It was probably recent, but maybe not like yesterday recent, maybe like last week recent. Anyways, but that was a failed assault. Ukraine is apparently moving towards Novodonetsky, although there's no obvious signs of success. Russia released a video shelling this position, suggesting that Ukraine has moved south, although I don't know if they were just passing through or if they actually control it. Who knows? Russia's moving north towards Rivnepil. They kind of retook these positions along this river. I can't remember the name of the river. We kind of talked about this on Tuesday. Nothing's really changed since then. And nothing is really going on in this whole area. Ukraine is shelling Novopokrovka very consistently, also Pavlivska and all of these kind of areas. There is a video of a Ukrainian assault on this little position here with unknown success. Maybe they've retaken or taken the position. I don't know. And yeah, that's kind of it. Yesterday, there was a video on this island here of Russia trying really desperately to shoot at Ukrainians, but really horribly missing with every single shot. But they tried, and that's what counts. But that was on this island right here. So Ukraine has they used to control all of these islands before the dam was destroyed. And then, from what I understand, they withdrew from the islands when the flood happened. And then when the flood subsided, like 4 days later, they went back on the islands. So these islands all appear to be Ukrainian controlled again. And similarly, Russia is dropping bombs and shelling this area of the Dachi area near the Antonovsky Bridge. They dropped 4 bombs there from an airplane, and they all missed their target because their bombers are not that good. So that's kind of really the news I got. There was a random explosion in Crimea. I'm not really sure what that was about. There was some fires. We talked about the boat already, full of arms. And we talked about the airport that has painted airplanes to confuse the satellites. Although that only works once, doesn't it? Because now we know the airplanes don't exist. And wow, you really got us. Also, they launched a few missiles into Odessa, all over Odessa, but in particular right here in Odessa, where 2 people were injured, and they blew up a whole bunch of grain in a granary. Is this a granary? I don't know. They blew up some grain in whatever that's called. And obviously they've been bombing the ports as well, all along this whole area. They've been hitting, I believe, also electric infrastructure, which obviously powers the ports, along with just blowing up grain, and also shooting at the Chinese embassy or consulate or whatever it's called. So yeah, that's kind of the news. Oh, and our friend Igor got arrested.
You're gonna be so upset if you left that one out.
So that's kind of the rundown of the news. It's not honestly, it's not super exciting. Kind of the more exciting things are the kind of the details of what pieces of equipment are getting destroyed. That sort of thing is kind of more interesting. But yeah, the spoiler is a lot is getting destroyed on a fairly regular basis.
Some of the levels of artillery destroyed, I really hope are true and accurate. Because if so, that would be phenomenal.
Yep.
Between ammo depots being hit further back, as we've seen, and if they really are losing that volume of fire, I mean, maybe this is me being wildly optimistic, but I earnestly believe if there was artillery parity, just like literally 1-to-1 artillery ratio, that Ukraine would win this war very, very quickly. Really, the biggest thing that stops everything is artillery. Now, there's other stuff, FPV drones, ATGM teams, but it is just the overwhelming amount of artillery disparity in the ammo being fired per day that is 90% of the problem. So anything that can be served to reduce that, I've seen some people talk about how it's already been reduced in a quantifiable way from what it was to what it is now. Well,
yeah,
anything that helps that equalized fashion is fantastic.
From what I've heard, it is currently a 1-to-5 ratio for artillery, which is better than it used to be. So this is the boat news that people are asking about. So it basically says that Russia has threatened commercial vessels in the Black Sea for carrying. They're basically saying that they're assuming all ships are carrying weapons. Meanwhile, their ship is carrying a weapon. Their commercial vessel is carrying weapons. And you can clearly see the weapons loaded in the boat, in the ship. So that's what this is about. And this image is from the 15th, which is 6 days ago. So that's what this boat's about. So that boat is right there.
Speaking of, maybe just chatting on a bit, I think there's a lot of expectations because then Ukraine made a statement saying any Russian flagged vessel entering occupied ports will also be considered a combatant. unfortunately, I don't see a lot of anything happening there. I think we're going to see a return to a just huge amount of mines in the Black Sea. You're probably going to see some sweep into the regular shipping lanes. Wouldn't be surprised if somebody hits one. That'll be a news story. And then a bunch of, frankly, the insurance companies that allow these ships to move are going to say, are you crazy? No, we don't want you guys sailing into mined waters. And I suspect that's part of the reason why Russia is blowing the hell out of the Odessa port system right now. So that way they have 2 to 3 weeks to just mine the shit out of everything. At which point everybody's just going to kind of throw up their hands and say, well, it's a bunch of mines. You know, it's not like there's a bunch of, it's not the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's not a line of Russian ships blocking the port. It's a lot more distributed than that. And I suspect they're going to continue to do it in that fashion. And aside from whatever the port is down by Romania that is still being used, that the Odessa seaport will be de facto blocked off from operating, at least in any serious amount, because people are going to get scared of running into a mine, which is a very real possibility.
Yeah. And the mines are probably going to kill people. Let's just be honest. The last time they
They're going to
placed
absolutely
mines,
kill people. Absolutely, they keep sailing. It blows people up.
it's not
For a while
even
there, it was almost daily.
it's not even sailing. You don't even have to sail to get killed by a mine.
Oh, just swimming, yeah.
Yeah,
Just, well, don't go swimming, please. There's a lot of signs down in Odessa, and the common joke, as I see it, is people be like, "Oh, look at this sign," and it says, "Don't do this. Don't go swimming." And they'll pan the camera 20 meters to the right, and it's just 100 people sunbathing and swimming or whatever. So don't make stupid decisions. Don't go swimming in a mined waterfront, please.
It's good advice.
So I don't know. I hear Odessa's lovely though. I've never been. But if I do go, I won't go swimming. So you can count on that.
So yeah, that's kind of the news. I don't know what else to say. I think we covered a lot.
His buddy got arrested too, which is causing
Oh yeah, his little friend.
the League of Angry Patriots.
Did they let him go? Did they let him go?
I don't.
They arrested him and let him go in an hour, saying that he's not allowed to do the protests in Russia.
Was it one of that? I thought it was they arrested him at his house. I know Gherkin's the only one that we saw in jail, and I think the last I heard he was complaining that he can't be on house arrest because of his heart or something. Which good for you, buddy. It's I don't know. I know there's a lot of people celebrating in Sloviansk tonight. Because
we celebrate. A lot of people from Donetsk region are celebrating this fucking idiot.
It's especially in the Donetsk areas that were occupied in 2014 and then liberated. So the Sloviansk area around Kramatorsk, some of these other areas as Russia got pushed back. Sloviansk, as I understand, I was up there a couple days ago. It's the big one because Russia was there and did some pretty terrible things, and then got pushed out. And everybody's like, "Oh, the locals were wow, that sucked. We never want that to happen again." And then airplanes get shot down, and now we've been in a war for 9 years, and so on and so forth. So people here really have a very real axe to grind, and it's been a lot of celebrating. The dude is, we say the world war criminal a lot here, but unironically, unashamedly, without Igor Gherkin, aka Strogov, I don't think the war in the Donbass would have escalated from the Russian side in the way that it did, because he basically tried to jumpstart the whole thing with a bunch of mercenaries and whip everybody up, and then call for help from Russia when it didn't work out, and then everything just kind of fell from there. There was one man who set at least the Donbass side of this war in motion, and I just hope he lives long enough to watch his dream fall apart. And then whatever happens, happens. But I was hoping he would drink himself to death live on stream, but this is a close second. I'll take it.
I also I want to say that I photoshopped this little picture of him today. And if anyone wants this high res to make memes, just let me know, and I'll send it to you. I photoshopped it for the purposes of memes, and I really want to see a lot of funny memes out of it.
I've seen one already.
I've seen a few too. But I have this high res one, and it has an alpha layer, so there's no backgrounds. It's much easier to make memes when there's an alpha layer. So just let me know. I'll give you the easy to make memes version. All right. So Constantine, do you have anything else to say?
No, I don't have much to add. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Charles, do you have any closing statements?
No, thanks a lot, Andrew. And yeah, always a pleasure.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Language Learner, for coming. And thank you for Charles and Constantine. And thanks to all the listeners. All right, so I'll be back on Tuesday with Constantine and Exit. All right, goodbye, everybody.